So let's talk about AI a little bit. You just released a big old article about development in AI just the other day, and I'm interested to see how that intersects with the work that you do at Daytona. So, what do you think the future of our coding looks like with AI as our friend?
Yeah, it was a very big article. I'm surprised a lot of people read it. It was like it's a 15-minute read, so it's like very long for today's attention span. The point of the article was mm, I was trying to distill what is happening in this market of AI coding and where we as a dev environment manager sort of fit. And the easiest way I thought was actually writing it out. So it was like a bunch of research and talking to a bunch of AI coding founders to sort of figure out where this world is going. And obviously these are all bets, right? Like there's like a bunch of people trying different things, anywhere from full autonomous coding to co-pilots to AI assisting humans to humans assisting AI. There's also those variations of them. Like there's all different variations of where this is going and what's happening. What was interesting for me as a co-founder of Daytona was that most coding agents right now, code assistants or full, whatever it is, run on your local machine. Most of them run inside of your IDE, which means that the ones that run inside of your IDE only have access to files. They don't have access to the file system itself. So they can't actually go out and run the code, which is a constraint for sure. But you have the, all hands dev and AI type companies, and they have like sandbox dev environments where the AI can work and figure these out, which is great. I'm like, okay, these companies have a, let's call it Daytona-esque type thing happening underneath it. And like, okay, that's very interesting to us. Like, where does that go and where does that lead? And the more I talk to all these companies, I found that most of them have an issue, at least of, you know, where is this running? Can the AI agent figure this out without saying, okay, here's a, sandbox environment, you know what it is. But more than that is like, can it actually execute the code of what it's doing to figure out what to do? Because you'll have a lot of these AI coding assistants, which will actually in the background, try things out and figure out what will work best. And then it sort of ships that to you and you only see that visibly. So now fast forward, imagine if the AI copilot or fully autonomous, whatever you want, can actually spin up multiple dev environments, the entire dev environment, and then try to execute different paths to solving a problem. And not only that, imagine it can like snapshot, oh, I'm going to try something different. Then it just snapshots another complete dev environment and then goes off a different path. You can essentially get a unlimited number of variations to the solution, which I think is super interesting because in our world where humans code, you're running on one dev environment. Maybe you have two or three on because you want to like switch between them, but you're actually working on one. In a world where AI coding is really taking off, you can imagine if you want to get to a solution in X amount of time, you will spin up 100, 1,000, 10,000 of these at the same time vertically just to get the output as fast as you can. Obviously, this depends on like your constraints between time and money. But if money is not a constraint and time is, and we're not talking about a lot, but like in that time, can you spin up a burst of these environments? That is something which I believe is a huge tailwind for remote dev environments in general. Because how are you going to solve this? There's no way you're solving this on your local machine, and there's no way you're going to solve this just by spinning up EC2 instances. There has to be a layer, an interface, let's call it, that the AI agent can interface with and spin these up specifically for them. And that's what I think about. And that's sort of the genesis of the article came from me trying to distill that, but I went in different directions because I don't think a lot of people are interested in that specifically.
It is definitely an interesting angle, and it does sound very, very expensive. Spinning up that many dev environments at the same time. It also seems interesting from like an AI perspective. Like if you use Cursor and you have a big repo, like we were trying to use it at work, and one of my coworkers doesn't really believe in it, was like, okay, ask it this question. And the guy who's super into AI was like, okay, I'll get back to you in 6 hours after it's done indexing all the code. So it's like doing that on each developer's machine just makes no sense. And maybe having some sort of like always on AI in the cloud development environment, like the cloud engineer, that seems very interesting to me.
I mean, that's sort of those are some of the key points that I think that like I have a lot of opinions on interfaces. So I don't think something like a Devon AI new type of interface is the long-term solution. I'm not saying that they won't switch to something else. Like whatever. But I don't think that's the interface there. But what I do think they're doing really well is, to your point, is like there's a Devin AI somewhere on one layer, and then it spins up these development environments underneath, and then it interacts with them. I actually don't know technically if it's in the dev environment or outside. I would build it outside if I could, because then it can be like a human and manage all these things on top of that. And so I see this happening, and I see that that is the only way to get to the solution which we want. And to your point with Cursor as well, Cursor does a lot of these things really, really well. And I'm pretty sure that Cursor won't be able to, long term, get to where they want to if they can't spin up at least another parallel dev environment, sort of shadow dev environment, where they can like run these tests, at least one, while you as a human are working with them. And so like how do they solve that? And I don't think you solve it by setting it up by hand as a human, but it will be a service that Cursor will either hopefully use us, someone else, build their own, whatever. But I do believe that it's the only way to solve that problem itself.
It does feel like to me that another interesting, it's like a little bit parallel, but a little bit separate problem here will be just like knowing what an AI service has access to. This is like another reason why I think about dev containers, especially when you get like into an enterprise context and you're like, okay, we understand that there are value in having like some AI service and or component in our infrastructure or something to like help our engineers move faster, but like there are like certain parts of our code that are, maybe like audited and like supposed to be very secure, and like you're like wanting to treat those like very separately than like other parts of your code base. And just having control over access and indexing and like, how these things actually interact with your infrastructure, I think is probably another interesting challenge, because if you just have, a developer on your team and they're just like enabling an AI agent using any third-party tool on code on their file system, and potentially like full-scale access to this what could be sensitive system, which is like untenable. So it's like it seems like there's going to be this future of like, how does AI interact at an enterprise scale? And I suspect a lot of it looks like dev containers, things like Daytona, like helping manage access. But I'm curious to hear about your like thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that you have to think about. So one of the key values, as mentioned, for Daytona is like the security management layers. Like, what can this developer do? What do they have access to? What repos can they spin up in these dev environments? Similar to that, each essential, and this is like a very new thing that we're thinking about, is like each user will also have to have credentials specifically for their AI engineer. Like, what can their AI, can they access this repo? Can it spin up this infrastructure? Can it do these things? And when it does these things, that that one did it. So did Yvonne's AI do this, or did Justin's do this, or did Andrew's? Like, who's did it and who has access? Essentially, like, will this be another person in your role-based access control? Maybe, maybe not. But it definitely, there will be space in the product itself where you will define what the human can do specifically and what each can do, and then what each person's AI can do, to be able to be sure, as you mentioned, like what they have access to, what will they spin out, what will they deploy, what will they contribute, like what they will do is very, very interesting. And it is one of the things that you will not be able to solve, again, as a SaaS product for these large companies, because they're very, very scared of what may happen.
Yeah, this is so fascinating to think about. So you have worked on this problem of like consistent development environments in various forms for many years now. So taking what you know now and where you are at, when you think about like how we write software in the future, or how you like interface with development environments at an organization or whatever it may be, what do you think are going to be the biggest changes that we're going to see in the next like 5 years?
I was talking to a lot of people about this, and there's a lot of different people have completely different answers on what they think will be the future. From what I've distilled, I feel that there's basically going to be two, which are very similar to what we have today. So right now we have like the IDE, the text editor, whatever it may be. And I believe that will be there for the next, 5 years for sure. Like, there will be variations, they'll add new feature sets and that, but I definitely feel that that is where it's going to go. In the meantime, there will be these like new, like they might even exist in the sense of like a low code type things. So like a Webflow type app, which is not for developers in the sense of engineers, but it is for people that want to make things. Maybe that exists. But I think that's like a different vertical, like a no code type vertical, rather than this is in a whole new interface. The other one is basically just like creating issues, like plain text, natural, like English language or whatever you want, where it's like, here is like a Jira, ticket, here's what we need to be done. And the AI goes out and solves it. So I feel that it's either here's the specification of what I need, go out and build this thing. You get a PR, you can comment on that, get back. Or it is the IDE that we know and love today with more updates and things that are more attuned to the AI itself. Everything in the middle, I feel doesn't actually have a place in the world. And I might be wrong. You can quote me on this. Like I can absolutely be wrong on this. Being in a space, like I built a couple of versions of IDE, like the only company that succeeded in the last couple of decade to create an IDE or a text editor is Microsoft. And that's because they put a lot of both, financial support into getting that done because it's part of their overarching mission. The other company, which is there, is like JetBrains, which has been chugging along for a long, long time and been successful. But before that, you had like Eclipse and Visual Studio. So I don't see another company coming in, even though we see a lot of now companies creating the AI IDE. It makes sense from a developer interface, developer time perspective. Like you want to own that interface, but it is such an expensive interface to own that if you don't have revenue from somewhere else, you can't make that happen. My only bet is if there's a new player, it will be one of the hyperscalers that creates their own. So like someone that can pay for that, AWS, Google, whatever. I don't know if they're working on this. I have no inside knowledge, but I feel that they're the only ones that can have the backing to create a successful product that the developer eyeballs have enough value that they can monetize it later on. So that's why I don't think that a new interface per se will work, because I don't know, you guys can tell me, I don't see either of you like switching to a new interface because it's AI feature. Like, I don't know, but that's my sort of take on that.
Yeah, I've personally tried to switch to Cursor a few times, but I just don't see the value all that much. Like it would take a large amount of value for me to go, okay, I'll throw out my 8 years of using VS Code and the muscle memory there, try to learn a new tool.
And even on that, Cursor is like a fork of VS Code. It's like it's most VS Code. And so a bunch of people in our team as well, like the words were Cursor's too shiny or some variation of that. There's like too much going on. And they've basically fallen back to either, Copilot or Continue Dev with like Sonnet inside. And like it works, like what they need to get done gets done without like obfuscating your interface too much. And again, we may be like the quote unquote older generation. I'm probably older generation. So the newer ones might change, but I feel it's going to be a very, very long and expensive battle to get there. And I don't think there's a payoff at the end of that specifically. But again, I have been wrong.